You know, while I'm sitting here with this camera on, I think I do want to say something about what it's like to be self-employed, because I left a job, a good job, at Lockheed Martin Canada, to become self-employed so that I could make my way to fund myself to go back to grad school to do a PhD and start a new career in robotics and aerospace engineering. And so like my own journey on that, my own experience of that was, well, it was like leaving a job. The same as I described previously about leaving a job. Just get a feeling that, yeah, you know what? I have to do this. I really feel that, damn the torpedoes, I really must do this, because the alternative to not do it isn't an alternative at all. There would be regret. And there's something that people fear more than failure. It's regret. The fear of regret is greater than the fear of failure. So that's, I think, something I heard said once, and it really rang true for me. So anyway, I figured the only way I can afford at least 1 year of tuition at a university, good university, will be to be self-employed. So I had some savings. I didn't do this blind. I had at the time about $50,000 in savings. So, there's a bit of a safety net there, probably 3 or 4 months that I could, survive, or even half a year. So there was some preparation. I had a lot of leave saved up, 6 or 8 weeks of leave that I hadn't used. So that has some cash value as well. Anyway, the only way to go back to school, to afford to do that, was to become a contractor, because the labor rates are fairly high. And I figured I could put away $40,000 to pay tuition at MIT or Caltech, Berkeley, Stanford, a good school in the US, and take my chances. So and the reason the rates are high is because you have no security, and all of the benefits that come to you when you are working at a job as an employee, you have to pay for those yourself. So I went to the vice president of the company, and I said, here's what I want to do. I want to go back to school, and I'm willing to stay attached to your technical programs for a period of 1 year. But to do that, I need to be a subcontractor. And it was a wonderful guy, Lee Gartley. I really liked him. And he said, I got 93 engineers in this company, and if I let you do that, then they're all going to want to belly up to the money bar. And he said, the answer is no. And I said, well, I don't think you have that problem, but if you do, I don't think you can handle it by refusing to do business with these people. Of the 93 engineers you have, a tiny fraction of them would be able to do what I'm proposing, and of those, because they have families and so forth, the fraction who could do it, only a tiny fraction of those would do it. And he said, well, the answer is no. I said, okay, I quit. And I had, I think, about 14 resumes in manila envelopes ready to go. I gave 6 weeks notice. Like, I'm just trying to be a nice person. You don't ever give more than 2 weeks notice or 1 week notice when you're going to change jobs, because you'll be treated differently. Rightly so, too. Companies are not your friend. Anyway, that's what I did. I didn't send any of the manila envelopes out at all. Anyway, I submitted my resignation letter. My boss, wonderful guy, didn't open it and I don't know if he ever opened it, but anyway, 2 days before, 1 day before my last day at work, the vice president said, okay, you're going to be a contractor. And things took off from there. I want to add a little important piece here about how to set your labor rate, which you will have to do when you become self-employed. So in my case, I was leaving a job to become self-employed, and I wanted to contract back to that company. And by the way, this is a normal thing to do. When an employee leaves one company and goes to another company, very often some of the work in the first company is left undone. And it's a professional courtesy for the new company to allow the new employee to contract back to the previous company to kind of tidy up what what they were working on. And when you do that, you are self-employed. Even if you're an employee in a new place, you're still self-employed. So you charge a labor rate back to your old company to tidy up your things. And this can go on for like a week or 2 weeks or a month or something. It's not a permanent arrangement. But the labor rate is determined by the fact that you're no longer an employee. You're doing work for that company, but you don't have any more benefits. So those all come through you collect on those through the labor rate. So what should the labor rate be? And this was a question that I had to confront. And I went to a friend and colleague and mentor figure of mine, Paul, and asked him, he was my director at the time actually, and I said, what are your thoughts about this? How do I set my labor rate as a contractor to Lockheed Martin Canada? And he said, you're not the first person to do this. So the company has done this before. He can't give any details. It wasn't necessary. But he said the companies like to do things that they've done before, especially if it's in their own best interest. And he said there's a low rate and a high. He said there's somebody in the company is contracting back at the lowest rate, and somebody else is at the highest rate. And his advice was put yourself in the middle, because it's non-controversial, or high middle. And so I asked him, can you give me a ballpark figure of what the low and the high is so I know how to place myself? And he gave me those numbers. He didn't attribute it to anybody, but this is the range. And so I picked a number, and that's how I set my labor rate. And then you can ratchet it up slowly, once a year, over time. And another thing is, certainly in defense contracting, you can only increase your labor rate by so much per year, because the contract money is, at the end of the day, is public funds. So you can't have like a 30% pay raise or labor rate increase. You're going to be fixed. So that makes it especially important to pick your labor rate very carefully at the beginning, because in a certain way, you're locked into it. At least with the federal government or Canadian Department of National Defense, if the money comes down through there. So pick that one carefully. Not too high and not too low. So that's it. And so it was a really interesting, strange, worthwhile experience to become self-employed. Get up first day and there's no place to drive to. And neither is there a check coming. I'm going to have to earn it myself. And now I did have a tiny contract from Lockheed, and I worked away on that. And eventually, after a month and then 30 days or whatever, 60 days I think they took, or maybe 90 to pay, along comes a check. And oh my God, I just actually made some money. And I'd made a bank account, opened a business bank account, and the money went in there. And it was, for the first time in my life, I had to write myself a check. I have to pay myself, like nobody else will do it. So how much do I make? Geez, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of money there, more than I've ever seen in my life. Maybe I made a lot, or maybe I made a little, maybe a small amount, maybe leave most of it in there. It was exciting to try to find that balance that you hadn't thought of before. So, and how being self-employed works is I am the employee of Sky Industries. I'm the only employee. And the company pays me money. I make money for the company, and the company, as a legal entity, takes that money and holds it, and then doles out some of it to me, and I pay taxes on that. And anything that the company buys becomes a tax exemption, like I get a tax credit for that, or it can be written off as a business expense depending on what it is. So that's how it works. That's how it worked. It's an adventure. So with pluses and minuses to it. But that's the broad strokes of what I did, like very broad strokes. So I hope that helps you somehow.